The champagne glass slipped from my fingers the moment my mother said it. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just casually. Like she was commenting on the weather. She's always been the scratched label in this family. A few people laughed. I didn't. Because I knew exactly who she meant. Me. The wedding. The ballroom was glowing, crystal chandeliers, white roses, soft violin music floating through the air. My younger sister, Elena, stood at the center of it all in a flawless ivory gown, smiling like she had stepped out of a fairy tale. And honestly, she deserved it. Elena had always been perfect. Perfect grades. Perfect friends. Perfect life. And me? I was the extra. The one people politely acknowledged but never really saw. I adjusted the sleeve of my simple navy dress, trying to make myself smaller, something I had mastered over the years. "Mom's calling you," my aunt whispered, nudging me toward the main table. I hesitated. That was never a good sign. The moment everything broke. My mother stood near the head table, surrounded by relatives and guests. Her smile was wide, her posture elegant, like she was hosting royalty. "Come here," she said when she saw me. I walked over, forcing a polite smile. "This is my elder daughter," she told a group of guests. For a second, I felt something warm. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Then she laughed lightly and added, "But you know how every family has one imperfect copy? She's ours." A scratched label. The group chuckled. Someone even nodded like it was relatable. I froze. The room didn't spin. The music didn't stop. No one gasped. Because to everyone else, it was just a joke. But to me, it was a lifetime of quiet humiliation wrapped neatly into one sentence. Flashbacks that never leave. That wasn't the first time. It never is. It starts small. Why can't you be more like your sister? She's just easier. You're too sensitive. By the time you grow up, you don't even question it anymore. You just accept your role. The background character. The disappointment. The one who tries harder but is never enough. My son. I turned away quickly, hoping no one noticed the tears gathering in my eyes. But someone did. "Mama?" I looked down. My 12-year-old son, Ion, stood there holding a plate of cake. His brows were furrowed in confusion. Why did Grandma say that? Kids don't miss things. Not the important ones. It's nothing, I said quickly. Just grown-up jokes. He didn't look convinced. Ion had always been different. Quiet. Observant. He saw things I tried to hide. The speech announcement. A few minutes later, the MC tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now have a few words from the family." Applause filled the room. My mother walked up first, graceful and confident. Of course she did. She spoke beautifully about love, about pride, about how Elena had always been the light of our lives. I stood at the edge of the room, clapping politely. Invisible. Again. Then came a few relatives. Then Elena's best friend. And just when I thought it was over. "I'd like to say something too." The voice was small. But clear. My heart dropped. Ion. The moment I tried to stop him. I rushed forward. "Ion, no, this isn't." But he had already taken the microphone. And for the first time in my life, the entire room went silent. For me. Ion stood behind the microphone, both hands gripping it too tightly. For a second, I thought he would freeze. He didn't. He took a breath. I didn't plan to speak today, he began, his voice slightly shaky but clear enough to reach every corner of the room. But I think I have to. A soft murmur moved through the guests. Some smiled, assuming it would be a cute, harmless speech. They were wrong. The first crack. My name is Ion, he continued, and I'm her grandson. He pointed toward my mother. A few people nodded politely. And I'm her son, he added, looking straight at me. Something tightened in my chest. I shook my head slightly, silently begging him to stop. Not here. Not like this. But Ion didn't look away. The question that changed the room. Can I ask something? He said, turning back to the crowd. Is it normal for a mom to call her own daughter a scratched label? The room went still. Completely still. No laughter this time. No polite smiles. Just silence. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. My mother shifted in her seat, her smile stiffening. Oh, sweetheart, she said lightly, trying to laugh it off, it was just a joke. It didn't sound like a joke, Ion said. He didn't raise his voice. But somehow, it felt louder than anything anyone had said all night. The truth, from a child. I've heard things like that before, he continued. Not just today. My breath caught. No one notices, he said. But I do. He looked at me again, and I could see something in his eyes I wasn't ready for. Pain. Not his own. Mine. What I never said out loud. My mom doesn't talk about it, he said, but I know she feels bad. A few guests looked at me now. Really looked at me. Not as background. Not as decoration. But as a person. And I suddenly didn't know where to hide. The comparison. You always say my aunt is perfect, Ion went on, glancing briefly at Elena. And she is amazing. Elena's smile faded slightly, confusion replacing it. But my mom, he paused. And for a second, I saw him struggle. Like he was choosing the right words very carefully. My mom is the strongest person I know. The shift. Something in the room changed. You could feel it. Like the air itself had shifted direction. My mom works all the time, he said. She takes care of me by herself. She never complains. I swallowed hard. She helps everyone, he added. Even people who don't treat her nicely. A few heads turned, slowly, toward my mother. The line no one expected. And if she's a scratched label, Ion continued, his voice steadier now. Then maybe the problem isn't the label. A collective breath was drawn. No one moved. No one spoke. The mother's reaction. My mother stood up abruptly. That's enough, she said, her tone sharper now. He's just a child. He doesn't understand. I understand more than you think, Ion replied. The words landed like a quiet explosion. Elena steps in. Mom, wait, Elena said softly, rising from her seat. All eyes shifted to her. The bride. The center of everything. But for the first time that night. She didn't look perfect. She looked unsure. When he said that, she continued slowly, about comparing us. She glanced at me. and something flickered in her expression. Guilt. A truth no one wanted to hear. You did always do that, Elena said to our mother. The room stirred again. Elena, my mother warned under her breath. But it was too late. I never said anything, she admitted, because it was easier. Her eyes met mine. And in that moment, years of distance suddenly felt very real. I thought she didn't care, Elena said quietly. But maybe, she just got used to it. The weight of silence. That was the thing about silence. It protects everyone. Except the one who stays quiet. My turn. I didn't remember deciding to walk forward. But suddenly, I was there. Next to my son. Next to the microphone. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. But from something unfamiliar. Release. For years, I had imagined this moment. Standing in front of my mother. Saying everything I had buried. In those imagined versions, I was strong. Calm. Unshakable. But reality? My hands trembled as I reached for the microphone. And my voice didn't come out at first. The silence before truth. Everyone was watching. Relatives. Strangers. Friends. People who had known me my whole life. And people who had barely noticed I existed. I looked at my son. Ion stood beside me, his small hand gently wrapping around mine. That was all it took. The first words. I didn't think I would ever do this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The microphone carried it anyway. But I guess, today is the day everything gets said. No one interrupted. Not this time. What it felt like. When you called me a scratched label, I continued, looking directly at my mother. It didn't hurt because it was new. A pause. It hurt because it wasn't. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Because now it wasn't a joke anymore. Now it had weight. The childhood I remembered differently. I don't remember being difficult, I said slowly. I remember trying. My voice steadied as the words began to flow. I tried to get good grades. I tried to make you proud. I tried to be enough. I let out a small, breathless laugh. But somehow, I was always the comparison. I gestured lightly toward Elena. Not her fault, I added quickly. Never hers. Elena's eyes filled with tears. The things that stay with you. I remember bringing home a certificate once, I said. It wasn't perfect. But I was proud of it. I looked at my mother. You said, your sister would have done better. A murmur rippled through the room. And after that, I continued, I stopped being proud of anything. The cost of being less. You don't realize what that does to someone, I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was clear. Grounded. It doesn't make them stronger. It makes them quieter. The years that followed. I learned to stay out of the way, I admitted. To not expect too much. To not ask for attention. I swallowed. And eventually, I stopped asking for love. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. The breaking point. I thought I was okay with it, I said. I really did. I looked down at Ion. But then I had him. My grip on his hand tightened. And I realized. I would never let anyone make him feel the way I felt. The truth about today. So when you said that today, I looked back at my mother. I wasn't hurt for myself. A pause. I was hurt because he heard it. Ayan's hand squeezed mine. The question that needed answering. I took a step closer. Why? I asked. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just, honestly. Why was I never enough for you? The mother, finally silent. For the first time in my life. My mother didn't have an answer ready. Her confident posture was gone. Her expression, uncertain. Almost fragile. She began. But the words didn't come. A truth beneath the surface. The room waited. And in that silence, something shifted again. Because this wasn't just about what she said. It was about what she couldn't. Elena's realization. I didn't see it, Elena whispered suddenly. All eyes turned to her again. I thought you were just distant, she said to me. I didn't realize you were pushed there. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm sorry. The unexpected apology. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real. And somehow, that made it hit harder. The weight begins to lift. I nodded slightly. I know, I said softly. And I meant it. Because sometimes, people don't hurt you on purpose. They just don't look closely enough to realize they are. Back to the real question. But I wasn't done. I looked at my mother again. Still waiting. Still hoping for something I wasn't even sure existed. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. All eyes were on my mother. For once, she couldn't escape it. The first crack in her voice. I didn't mean it the way it sounded, she said finally. Her voice wasn't strong anymore. It was smaller. Careful. Like she was stepping on unfamiliar ground. No more avoiding. But you said it, I replied. Not harsh. Not emotional. Just factual. And it wasn't the first time. She flinched. That alone said more than any explanation could. The image she built. I always wanted everything to look perfect, she admitted slowly. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. This family, our reputation, how people see us. A few relatives exchanged glances. Because now, they were part of the truth too. The comparison that started it all. When you were younger, she continued, looking at me but not quite meeting my eyes. You were different. I let out a quiet breath. Here it comes. You asked questions. You challenged things. You didn't just follow. Her voice tightened. And I didn't know how to handle that. The easy child. She glanced at Elena. Your sister was easier. She listened. She fit into the image. Elena looked down, her expression conflicted. Not proud. Not anymore. The real reason. So my mother hesitated. And for a moment, I wondered if she would stop again. If she would retreat like always. But she didn't. I corrected you more, she said. Pushed you more. A bitter truth settled in. You didn't push me, I said quietly. You dismissed me. The line that broke her defense. That was it. That was the sentence. Her composure cracked. I thought I was helping you, she said, her voice rising slightly. Making you better, stronger. No, I interrupted gently. You were making me feel like I wasn't enough to begin with. The truth she avoided for years. She looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see authority. I didn't see control. I saw regret. Ion's final push. Why didn't you ever say something nice? Ion asked softly. His voice wasn't accusing. Just curious. Honest. And somehow, that made it harder to answer. The answer no one expected. I didn't know how, my mother whispered. The room stilled again. I grew up the same way, she added. Nothing was ever enough for me either. A quiet shock moved through the crowd. Pain passed down. Unnoticed. Unquestioned. Repeated. The cycle exposed. I thought that's how you raise strong children, she said. By pointing out what they lack. Her voice broke. I didn't realize. I was breaking you instead. The moment of choice. And there it was. Not a perfect apology. Not a dramatic redemption. Just truth. Raw and incomplete. I stood there, absorbing it. All of it. Years of silence. Years of hurt. Years of trying to understand something that finally had an answer. What do you do with this? That was the real question. Not for her. For me. Because understanding doesn't erase pain. It just explains it. Ion's hand. My son squeezed my hand again. Grounding me. Reminding me. I wasn't that invisible girl anymore. The words I chose. I can't pretend it didn't hurt, I said. My voice was calm. But firm. And I can't just forget it. My mother nodded slowly. Like she expected that. But then. But I don't want him to grow up carrying this, I added, glancing at Ion. I don't want this to continue. A small breath escaped my mother. Almost like relief. The beginning of something new. So this is what I can do, I said. I can be honest. I can set boundaries. A pause. And I can choose how much of this relationship I rebuild. Not destroy. Not blindly forgive. But rebuild. On my terms. The mother's response. I don't expect you to forgive me today, she said quietly. But I would like the chance to do better. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. Elena steps forward. I want that too, Elena said, walking closer. She looked at me, not as competition, not as comparison. But as a sister. For both of us. The shift is complete. The room felt different now. Not heavy. Not tense. Just honest. For the first time in years. For a long moment, no one moved. It was strange. This was supposed to be a wedding, music, laughter, celebration. But instead, it had become something else entirely. Something real. The room that finally saw me. I looked around slowly. At the same people who had laughed earlier. The same people who had heard that one sentence. Scratched label. But now? They weren't smiling. They weren't amused. They were thoughtful. Some even looked uncomfortable. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible in a room full of people. Yawned, my turning point. I knelt slightly so I was at eye level with my son. You didn't have to do that, I whispered. I know, he said. Simple. Honest. But you always tell me to stand up when something is wrong. I blinked, caught off guard. Had I really said that? Of course I had. Just, never for myself. The quiet lesson. Guess I was listening, he added with a small shrug. A soft laugh escaped me. Not the kind you use to hide something. The kind that comes from relief. The wedding resumes. Differently. The MC, clearly unsure of what to do, stepped forward again. Thank you for those heartfelt words, he said carefully. A few light chuckles broke the tension. But they were different now. Gentler. Respectful. Let's continue celebrating this beautiful union, he added. And just like that, the music returned. But something had changed. People didn't rush back to dancing immediately. Instead, a few came toward me. Not out of curiosity. Not out of obligation. But with something I wasn't used to receiving from them. Acknowledgement. The unexpected conversations. I didn't realize, one relative said quietly. Another added, you handled that with so much strength. I nodded politely. Not because I needed their validation. But because for once, they were seeing the truth. Elena's moment. Later, near the edge of the dance floor, Elena found me. Her dress shimmered under the lights, but her expression was soft. Uncertain. Can I hug you? She asked. That alone told me how much things had shifted. I didn't answer. I just stepped forward. And we hugged. Not as rivals. Not as opposites. But as sisters who had finally understood each other. The words we never said before. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have noticed. You were a kid too, I replied gently. We both were. She pulled back, her eyes searching mine. We can do better now, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. And for the first time, I believed it. The hardest conversation. I almost left without speaking to my mother again. Part of me wanted to. It would have been easier. But healing doesn't come from avoiding. So I walked toward her. Not the same anymore. She looked different. Not physically. But the way she held herself. Less certain. More aware. I'm glad you stayed, she said quietly. No more fear. I stayed for me, I replied. And for him. I nodded toward Ayan, who was now happily eating dessert at a nearby table. A small smile touched her face. He's a good boy. He is, I said. And he deserves better than what I had. The boundary. I'm not going back to how things were, I continued. Calm. Clear. No comparisons. No comments like today. She nodded immediately. I understand. And if it happens again, I added, I will walk away. No anger. Just truth. Her acceptance. That's fair, she said. And for once. She didn't argue. She didn't dismiss. She listened. A small step forward. I'd like to try, she said after a pause. To be better. I studied her for a moment, looking for the same old patterns, the same dismissiveness. But I didn't see it. Not now. The honest answer. I don't know what that looks like yet, I said. But we can take it one step at a time. That was all I could offer. And it was enough. The night ends. As the wedding slowly came to a close, I stood near the exit with Ayan beside me. The same hall. The same lights. The same people. But I wasn't the same person who had walked in. The final realization. I had spent years trying to be enough for someone else. Trying to fit into a version of myself that was easier to accept. Quieter. Smaller. Less. But standing there, holding my son's hand, I realized something simple. Something powerful. I was never the scratched label. I was just placed in the wrong story. And now, I wasn't disappearing anymore. The last line. As we stepped out into the cool night air, Ayan looked up at me. Are you okay now? He asked. I smiled. Not perfectly. Not completely healed. But stronger. Yes, I said. I think I finally am.